Hello, and welcome to Jiang Decoded. I'm Jiang, and on this channel, we explore history, geopolitics, economics, technology, and the global events shaping our world through careful research and evidence-based analysis. Today, we're examining one of the most strategically important waterways on Earth and why its future could influence far more than the Middle East. Let's begin. Imagine a narrow stretch of water that most people could not locate on a map, yet one that influences the price of fuel in Europe, manufacturing in Asia, shipping costs across the globe, and the strategic calculations of nearly every major power. The Strait of Hormuz is often described as an energy corridor, but that definition barely captures its true significance. It is a geopolitical crossroads where geography, economics, military strategy, international law, and diplomacy intersect. Every time tensions rise in this region, the world reacts. Not simply because of what might happen there, but because of what those developments reveal about the changing balance of power in international politics. In recent years, discussions surrounding the Strait of Hormuz have become increasingly intense. Public debate usually focuses on dramatic headlines, naval deployments, military exercises, sanctions, or political speeches. Yet the most important developments are often the ones that receive the least attention. The real story is rarely a single announcement or a single military action. Instead, it is the gradual shift in how countries adapt to pressure, build partnerships, and reshape their strategic options over time. To understand why this matters, we first need to step back and examine the geography itself. The Strait of Hormuz forms the only maritime connection between the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. Countries including Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran depend on this route for a large share of their energy exports. Millions of barrels of oil and vast quantities of liquefied natural gas move through these waters every day. Any disruption, whether real or anticipated, immediately becomes a concern for energy markets, insurers, shipping companies, and governments around the world. History reminds us that control over key trade routes has always shaped the rise and decline of great powers. Ancient empires competed for ports and river crossings because commerce was inseparable from political influence. In later centuries, strategic waterways such as the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal transformed global trade by shortening distances and reducing costs. Today, the Strait of Hormuz occupies a similar position. It is not simply a shipping lane, it is one of the world's most consequential strategic chokepoints. However, geography alone does not determine geopolitical outcomes. What matters just as much is how countries respond to that geography. Every nation approaching the Strait of Hormuz sees something different. Energy exporters view it as the gateway to international markets. Importing nations see it as a vital supply line that must remain open. Naval planners consider it a strategic passage requiring constant monitoring. Investors view it through the lens of market stability. These different perspectives often explain why diplomatic negotiations become just as important as military deployments. One of the biggest misconceptions in public discussion is the belief that geopolitical competition is decided only by military strength. Military capabilities certainly matters, but it represents only one element of national power. Economic resilience, technological innovation, diplomatic relationships, industrial capacity, financial stability, and public confidence all contribute to a country's long-term strategic position. Modern conflicts are rarely decided by a single battle. More often, they become contests of endurance, adaptation, and political will. This is particularly relevant when considering how states respond to economic pressure. Throughout history, sanctions, trade restrictions, and maritime controls have been used to influence political behavior. Sometimes they achieve their objectives. At other times, they encourage governments to develop alternative partnerships, diversify supply chains, or invest in new transportation corridors. Rather than eliminating strategic options, pressure can sometimes accelerate innovation and cooperation among states facing similar challenges. Consider the broader trend unfolding across Eurasia over the past decade. Infrastructure projects, railway corridors, pipeline networks, and new trade agreements have steadily expanded the number of routes connecting Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. These developments were not created overnight, nor were they designed for a single crisis. Instead, they reflect a long-term effort by many countries to reduce dependence on any one transportation route or any single point of vulnerability. Whether motivated by economics, national security, or regional cooperation, the overall direction has been remarkably consistent: diversification. This raises an important question. If one strategic route becomes uncertain, do countries simply wait for conditions to improve, or do they search for alternatives? History suggests the latter. Trade has always adapted to political realities. Merchants, governments, and industries continuously seek routes that reduce costs, minimize risk, and improve reliability. Even if alternative pathways are longer or more expensive in the short term, they can become increasingly attractive when uncertainty dominates traditional routes. The Strait of Hormuz, therefore, represents more than a physical location. It has become a symbol of strategic leverage. The possibility of disruption alone can influence global markets because expectations often move faster than events themselves. Financial markets respond not only to confirmed developments, but also to perceived risks. Shipping companies adjust insurance premiums based on potential threats. Energy traders price uncertainty into contracts before any interruption actually occurs. In today's interconnected economy, perception itself has become a strategic factor. For governments, this creates a complex balancing act. They must deter conflict while avoiding unnecessary escalation. They seek to reassure allies without provoking adversaries. They invest in military readiness while continuing diplomatic engagement. Success depends not only on demonstrating strength, but also on maintaining credibility, preserving economic stability, and building international support. These objectives do not always align perfectly, making every decision more complicated than it first appears. As we continue this discussion, one theme becomes increasingly clear. The future of the Strait of Hormuz will not be determined solely by ships, missiles, or military exercises. It will also be shaped by economics, infrastructure, diplomacy, technological change, and the ability of nations to adapt to an evolving international system. Understanding that broader picture is essential, because the headlines we read today often represent only the visible surface of much deeper strategic transformations already underway. One of the most fascinating aspects of international politics is that countries rarely think only about today's crisis. Governments are constantly preparing for events that may happen 5, 10, or even 20 years into the future. This long-term planning explains why infrastructure, trade agreements, energy partnerships, and regional alliances receive so much attention from policymakers. They understand that military strength alone cannot guarantee economic security. A nation may possess advanced armed forces, but if its industries cannot obtain energy, if its trade routes become unreliable, or if investor confidence collapses, strategic advantages can gradually erode over time. This is why energy security has become one of the defining issues of the 21st century. Countries are no longer focused only on producing energy. They are equally concerned with transporting it safely, storing it efficiently, and ensuring that political crises do not interrupt global supply. The Strait of Hormuz sits at the center of that equation because it connects producers with consumers across multiple continents. Any uncertainty surrounding this route immediately attracts the attention of governments, multinational corporations, financial institutions, and energy markets. Yet it would be a mistake to view this situation as a simple contest between two countries. Modern geopolitics rarely operates in such straightforward terms. Every regional crisis influences a much wider network of relationships. Nations that appear to be spectators often have significant economic interests at stake. Shipping companies calculate insurance costs. Importing countries evaluate strategic reserves. Exporters assess market opportunities. Investors monitor commodity prices. Diplomatic missions increase communication. Even countries geographically distant from the Middle East begin reviewing their own economic exposure to potential disruptions. International law also plays an important role in these discussions. Freedom of navigation has long been considered one of the fundamental principles supporting global commerce. Maritime routes are not simply local waterways. They connect economies across the world. For that reason, debates surrounding shipping rights often extend beyond regional politics and become matters of broader international concern. Different governments may interpret legal principles differently, but almost all recognize that stable maritime trade benefits the global economy as a whole. Another important factor is technology. Modern surveillance systems, satellites, commercial shipping databases, unmanned aerial systems, and real-time communications have transformed how governments monitor strategic waterways. Information now travels faster than physical cargo. A single announcement can influence commodity markets within minutes. Satellite imagery can reveal shipping movements almost instantly. Publicly available tracking services allow analysts, journalists, and even ordinary citizens to observe changes in maritime traffic that would have remained hidden only a generation ago. Technology has fundamentally changed the relationship between information and strategy. Economic resilience has therefore become just as valuable as military preparedness. Countries increasingly invest in alternative energy sources, diversified transportation networks, strategic petroleum reserves, and regional partnerships designed to reduce dependence on any single route. These investments are not reactions to one particular crisis. They represent long-term efforts to strengthen national resilience in an increasingly interconnected world. History provides many examples of similar transitions. Throughout the centuries, global trade has repeatedly adapted to political change. When one route became unreliable, merchants sought another. When empires declined, new commercial centers emerged. When technology evolved, entire transportation systems transformed. The lesson is remarkably consistent. Global commerce is resilient because it adapts. That does not mean disruptions are painless, but it does suggest that long-term stability often depends on innovation rather than confrontation. This perspective also reminds us that geopolitical competition is rarely static. Alliances evolve, economic priorities change, new technologies emerge, demographic trends reshape national interests. Decisions made today may produce consequences that remain invisible for years. Strategic planning, therefore, requires looking beyond immediate headlines and considering how today's choices may influence tomorrow's international landscape. Looking ahead, three broad possibilities deserve careful attention. The first is continued strategic competition combined with controlled diplomacy. Under this scenario, disagreements remain significant, yet governments continue seeking mechanisms to prevent direct confrontation. Military preparedness exists alongside diplomatic engagement, allowing tensions to fluctuate without escalating into a larger regional conflict. The second possibility involves prolonged economic competition. Instead of focusing primarily on military actions, countries intensify efforts to secure alternative trade routes, strengthen regional partnerships, invest in domestic industries, and reduce strategic dependence on vulnerable supply chains. In this scenario, infrastructure, logistics, and technology become central instruments of geopolitical influence. The third possibility is gradual de-escalation through sustained diplomacy. History shows that even long-standing rivals occasionally discover areas of mutual interest. Energy security, maritime safety, humanitarian concerns, and economic stability can create incentives for dialogue even when broader political disagreements remain unresolved. Such progress is often slow and imperfect, but it demonstrates that diplomacy continues to play an essential role in international affairs. Ultimately, the future of the Strait of Hormuz will depend not on a single announcement, a single speech, or a single military deployment. It will depend on countless decisions made by governments, businesses, international organizations, and regional partners over many years. The real story is therefore much larger than one waterway. It is about how the international system responds to uncertainty, how nations balance competition with cooperation, and how economic interdependence continues to reshape global politics. Perhaps the most valuable lesson is that geopolitical events should never be viewed in isolation. Every headline exists within a much broader historical context. Every diplomatic statement reflects deeper strategic calculations. Every economic agreement reveals something about the future priorities of the countries involved. By connecting these pieces together, we gain a clearer understanding of how the international system evolves over time. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a place on the map. It is a reminder that geography still matters, that economics remains inseparable from politics, and that strategic decisions often produce consequences extending far beyond national borders. Whether future developments bring greater stability or renewed competition, understanding the underlying forces will always be more valuable than reacting only to the latest headline. As observers, our responsibility is not merely to consume information, but to evaluate it carefully, compare different perspectives, question assumptions, and appreciate the complexity behind international affairs. The world is changing rapidly, and the ability to think critically about those changes has never been more important. Because in geopolitics, the biggest stories are rarely the loudest. They are often the quiet shifts occurring beneath the surface, changes in strategy, economics, technology, and diplomacy that gradually reshape the international order long before they become obvious to everyone else. Thank you for spending your time with me today. If you enjoyed this analysis, please subscribe to Jiang Decoded and join me for future documentaries exploring history, geopolitics, economics, artificial intelligence, and the forces shaping our world. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep seeking evidence, and never stop looking beyond the headlines. I'm Jiang, and I'll see you in the next video.